There's something uniquely terrifying about being home alone. It's when the silence becomes deafening, when the familiar comfort of your own space begins to feel off. You tell yourself it's just your mind playing tricks, that the creaks and whispers are nothing more than the house settling. But sometimes, just sometimes, you're not alone at all. Tonight, we explore a terrifying true story, one that proves the feeling of being watched isn't always paranoia. Sometimes something or someone is really there. Emma had lived in her apartment for 3 years, a cozy one-bedroom unit on the top floor of an old complex. It was nothing fancy, but it was hers. Safe, comfortable. At least, that's what she believed. It started with small things. The sound of faint footsteps late at night, soft creaks that seemed too deliberate to be random. She chalked it up to old pipes, the wind, maybe even her neighbors. But there were other things too, things that made less sense. She'd wake up to find the kitchen cabinets slightly open, drawers she was sure she had closed the night before left ajar. And then there was the food. It wasn't just missing. It was disappearing in ways that made her question her own memory. A half-eaten sandwich she didn't remember making, a cereal box left out when she was certain she'd put away. Still, she rationalized it. Maybe she was just distracted, forgetful. Maybe stress was getting to her. But the unease never left her. One night, as she lay in bed, scrolling through her phone, she heard it, soft, deliberate movement coming from above her. Not the occasional pop of an old ceiling, but footsteps. Slow, heavy, her body tensed, every muscle locked in place. She stared up at the ceiling, waiting, listening, and then silence. For a moment, she convinced herself it was nothing, that she had imagined it. But then she saw it. The attic door, just slightly, barely noticeable, open. She hadn't even known the apartment had an attic space. It wasn't something she had ever paid attention to. But now, the tiny square opening in the ceiling of her hallway wasn't fully closed. Just a crack, just enough for something to have been watching her. A chill crept up her spine as she stood frozen in place. 100 thoughts raced through her mind. Had it been like that all along? Had she simply never noticed? Or had someone, or something, opened it that night? She forced herself to move, to grab a broom from the closet and poke at the attic door. It wobbled slightly before shutting. She locked herself in her bedroom, heart pounding against her ribs, and waited for the morning light. At this point in the story, Emma's fear is still wrestling with her rational mind. We, as people, are wired to dismiss the unsettling because the alternative is far worse. The idea that a stranger might be living undetected inside your own home is terrifying beyond belief. And yet, stories like Emma's aren't just urban legends. They've happened in real life. Cases of frogging, where intruders secretly live in attics, basements, even inside walls, are eerily more common than we'd like to think. So the question is, when does suspicion turn into reality? The next day, Emma tried to convince herself she had imagined it all, that she was overreacting, but the unease never left her. Every time she walked past the hallway, she felt the weight of unseen eyes on her. That night, she set up a small trap. A simple one. She took a piece of Scotch tape and placed it over the attic opening. If it moved, she would know. And it did. The next morning, the tape was torn as if someone had pushed against it from the inside. Her stomach twisted into knots as she grabbed her phone and called the police. She tried to stay calm, tried to convince herself she was overreacting, but when the officers arrived and pulled down the attic door, what they found was worse than she ever could have imagined. A thin, stained mattress, discarded food wrappers, and a pile of her own missing belongings. Someone had been living there, watching her, moving through her space when she slept. The officers searched the attic, but found no one. Whoever had been there had escaped. Perhaps through the building's ventilation system. Perhaps down through the very hallway she had walked through just minutes before calling the police. Stories like Emma's tap into one of our deepest fears. The fear of invasion, of being watched, of the walls around us not being as safe as we believe. What's most unsettling is that these aren't just ghost stories. They happen. People have discovered strangers living in their attics, crawl spaces, and basements, sometimes for weeks, even months. So tonight, as you settle into the comfort of your own home, listen carefully to the silence. Pay attention to the small, unnoticeable things: an open cabinet, a missing snack, a sound in the middle of the night. Because sometimes when you think you're alone, you're not. They say when you're alone, your mind plays tricks on you. A shadow shifts in the corner of your eye. A silhouette lingers outside your window. You tell yourself it's nothing. A trick of the light, a branch swaying in the wind. But what if it isn't? What if something is standing there just beyond the glass, watching, waiting unseen by everyone but you? Tonight, we explore a story that will make you question what lurks in the darkness just beyond your vision. A teenager home alone for the weekend notices something terrifying, a shadowy figure outside their window. But when they check the security cameras, nothing is there. That is, until they rewind the footage. It started as an ordinary weekend. Tyler's parents had gone out of town, leaving him with the house to himself. At 16, he was more than comfortable staying alone. After all, this wasn't the first time. A stocked fridge, Wi-Fi, and an entire weekend to binge-watch horror movies? It was supposed to be perfect. The first time he saw it, he was in the kitchen making a late-night snack. As he reached for the fridge, movement outside the window caught his eye. A dark figure, tall, unmoving, silhouetted against the dim glow of the neighbor's porch light. His heart pounded. The figure was just standing there, staring. He flicked on the backyard light. Nothing. The yard was empty. Maybe it was his reflection? A shadow? He shook it off and returned to his movie, blaming his paranoia on too many horror films. But then it happened again. This time it was worse. An hour later, Tyler was in his room when a strange feeling crept over him. The unmistakable sensation of being watched. He turned toward his window, and there it was again. The shadow, standing in the backyard, unmoving. The fear settled in now, cold and real. He grabbed his phone and opened the security camera app. The motion sensors hadn't picked up anything. The backyard camera showed nothing but still trees and the empty lawn. Yet, when he looked up from his phone, the shadow was still there. Tyler's hands trembled as he refreshed the feed, hoping it was some kind of lag, a glitch. But the camera showed only the night. No figure, no movement. And then he made the mistake of looking away. When he looked back, it was gone. Tyler spent the next hour staring at his cameras, watching every angle of the house. He left the lights on, triple-checked the locks, and tried to convince himself that his eyes were playing tricks on him. But something gnawed at him, an unease that refused to fade. So he did something he hadn't thought of before. He rewound the footage. At first, there was nothing. Just an empty yard, the occasional flicker of headlights from passing cars. And then, at exactly the moment he had seen the shadow, something changed. The bushes at the edge of the yard rustled, bending slightly, as if something was moving through them. Then, for a fraction of a second, between frames, there it was. A shape, a tall, humanoid figure, standing just outside the camera's range. Tyler paused the video, heart pounding. The figure had no defining features, no face, no clothing detail, just a dark, human-shaped mass. But that wasn't the worst part. As he continued frame by frame, the figure moved, but not normally. It didn't walk. It shifted, jumping between shadows, never fully appearing on screen. It was almost as if it knew where the camera's blind spots were, like it had done this before. A sinking realization hit him. Whatever this thing wasn't just watching him. It was toying with him. Panic surged through him. Tyler locked every door, turned on every light, and even considered calling his parents. But what would he say? There's a shadow outside my window that doesn't show up on camera? Who would believe that? Then a sound. A single, sharp tap on the window. His breath caught in his throat. Slowly, he turned. There was nothing there. He grabbed a flashlight, heart hammering, and forced himself to the window. He shined a light outside, scanning the yard. Empty. Then, he lowered the flashlight beam to the ground beneath the window. And that's when he saw them. Footprints. Fresh, deep imprints in the dirt, leading from the bushes right up to the glass. Tyler didn't sleep that night. He kept his phone in his hand, cameras pulled up, waiting for the figure to return. but never did. By morning, the footprints were gone, as if they had never been there at all. To this day, he doesn't know what he saw. A prowler? A ghost? Something worse? But one thing is certain. It knew where to stand. It knew how to hide. And it knew that he was watching. What makes this story so terrifying isn't just the idea of someone or something lurking outside your home. It's the way it evades detection. We rely on security cameras and technology to protect us. But what happens when something knows how to avoid them? When something exists just beyond what we can see? Many urban legends and folklore tales speak of beings that can only be perceived in glimpses. Creatures that move in the corners of our vision, slipping between frames of reality. Shadow people, interdimensional entities, even manifestations of fear itself. Was Tyler's visitor a flesh and blood intruder? Or was it something else entirely? Maybe we're never truly alone. Maybe sometimes we're just not looking in the right place. Sweet dreams if you can sleep. Ethan had always hated being home alone at night. It wasn't that he's scared easily. He wasn't the type to jump at creaking floorboards or the hum of the refrigerator kicking on. But there was something about his old house, something about the way it settled in the dark, that made his skin crawl. It was a quiet evening when it happened. He was lounging on the couch, watching TV, his phone on the coffee table beside him. Then the house phone rang. A landline. Ethan frowned. Hardly anyone called it anymore. He considered ignoring it, but something nagged at him. He picked up the receiver. Silence. Hello. A burst of static. Then, through the crackling distortion, he heard it. A voice. His own voice. Check the basement. His stomach dropped. He pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at it like it might burn him. The call ended with a sharp click. He let out a nervous laugh, shaking his head. A prank. It had to be a prank. Maybe a weird telemarketer with voice mimicry software? He wasn't sure, but something in the way his own voice had spoken, low, urgent, unnatural, made his hands clammy. Trying to shake the unease, he went back to his show. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. He hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, he answered. Check the basement. The same words. The same voice. But this time, there was something else beneath it, a faint scratching sound like fingernails on wood. Ethan slammed the phone down. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Someone was messing with him. He checked his cell phone. No missed calls, no messages. The landline wasn't connected to his cell, so no one he knew would call it. He took a deep breath and glanced toward the basement door across the room. It sat there, slightly ajar, a black void descending into the unknown. Check the basement. No, absolutely not. He wasn't playing along with some bizarre prank. He forced himself to focus on the TV, determined to ignore any more calls. But they didn't stop. The phone rang 3 more times. He refused to answer. Then, just as he was convincing himself to unplug it, something changed. The final call didn't come through the landline. It came through his cell phone, and it was from his own number. His breath hitched. He stared at the screen. How was that possible? With a shaking hand, he answered. Silence. Then, in the same distorted, impossible version of his voice, check the basement. And then a sound, a slow creak. Not from the phone, but from across the room. The basement door was opening. There are countless stories of strange phone calls, calls from the dead, calls from unknown numbers, calls that should never have been possible. But what makes this story truly terrifying is the personal nature of it. A voice identical to Ethan's. A command that felt more like a warning. One common theory is that the phenomenon Ethan experienced was a form of doppelganger disturbance. Throughout folklore, doppelgangers are often associated with omens of death, warnings from beyond, or even malevolent entities impersonating someone to lure them into danger. Could this phone call have been some sort of supernatural version of a doppelganger reaching out from another realm? Or was this something far more insidious, a glitch in reality itself? Let's think about the psychological terror of hearing your own voice instructing you. It suggests a loss of control, an intrusion into the one thing that should be uniquely yours, your identity. If your own voice can be hijacked, what else can be? Some believe that paranormal phenomena can manipulate electronics, reaching out through technology as a medium. Ghost hunters often report voices caught in white noise, frequencies carrying whispers from the beyond. But this case is different. The voice wasn't just a whisper. It was his. And let's not forget the basement. Why is it always the basement? Basements are often used in horror to represent the subconscious, the unknown, the hidden fears we suppress. They're dark, deep, and connected to the very foundation of a home, yet rarely explored. When something in horror tells you to check the basement, it's never good. So what was waiting for Ethan down there? If he had checked, would he have found something tangible? A stalker? An intruder? Something explainable? Or was it something far worse? A shadow of himself? A presence that wanted to take his place? We don't know if Ethan ever went down there. Some say he finally worked up the courage to check, only to find nothing at all. Others say he moved out soon after and refused to speak about what happened. And yet, the phone still rings. Stories like this tap into something primal. The fear of being alone, yet not really alone. The fear of technology acting on its own, whispering things it shouldn't. The fear that, just maybe, the voice calling you isn't an intruder, but something much closer. Something wearing your skin. Something waiting. Somewhere deep in the dark. Next time your phone rings in the middle of the night, check the caller ID. And if it's your own number, don't pick up. It started with small noises. Elliot was 7 years old when he first heard it. A soft, persistent scratching, like nails scraping against wood. It wasn't loud, just enough to stir him from sleep. At first, he thought it was a mouse. Their old house had creaky floors and drafty windows. But as the nights passed, the sound became more deliberate, more methodical. Not like a mouse, but like something trying to get out. His parents didn't believe him. "It's just the house settling," his father said, ruffling his hair. "Houses make noises, buddy." His mother offered a softer explanation. "Maybe you had a bad dream, sweetheart. Sometimes dreams feel real, even after you wake up." Elliot tried to accept their reassurances, but the sound never stopped. In fact, it got worse. One night, Elliot was jolted awake by a different noise, not scratching but breathing. A low, wheezing breath. Close. Too close. He didn't move at first. His heart pounded as he squeezed his eyes shut. He wanted to believe it was his imagination. But then he heard it again. A slow, rattling inhale and an even slower exhale. And then, a shuffle. The unmistakable sound of something shifting beneath his bed. Elliot's breath caught in his throat. He knew that if he looked, he would see something staring back at him. His fingers gripped his blanket, pulling it over his head like a fragile shield. If he stayed still, maybe it would go away. Maybe it wouldn't notice he was awake. Then the bed shifted, the weight of something pressing against the mattress. And a whisper, so faint it barely existed. "Come down here." The next morning, Elliot refused to sleep in his room. His parents, still convinced it was nothing, finally relented and decided to check under the bed, just to prove to him that nothing was there. His father got on his knees, exhaling in exasperation. "See, bud? There's." He stopped. A long, heavy silence stretched between them. Elliot's mother frowned. "What is it?" His father reached a hand under the bed, feeling around. His fingers brushed against something cold, wet. His face twisted in disgust as he pulled his hand back. Dark, slimy residue coated his fingertips. "What the hell?" Elliot's mother grabbed a flashlight and shined it into the darkness under the bed. The beam wavered as she adjusted her grip. At first, all they saw were dust bunnies and forgotten toys. But then, a shadow moved, a shape coiled tightly against the farthest corner, just beyond the light's reach. And then, in the blink of an eye, it slithered back, vanishing into nothingness. That was the last night Elliot slept in his room. His parents, pale and shaken, never spoke about what they saw. His father tried to rationalize it. "A pipe leak," he muttered. "Maybe some mold." But Elliot saw the fear in his mother's eyes. She knew. That night, they moved his bed to another room. Sealed the door. Never spoke of it again. But Elliot never forgot. Sometimes, even now, in the dead of night, he swears he hears it. That faint, familiar sound. The slow, patient scratching from beneath the floorboards. Waiting, hoping he'll come back. Why do so many childhood fears center around what lurks beneath the bed? Could it be some evolutionary instinct, an ancient fear of predators hiding in the shadows? Or was there something deeper, something far more sinister? Many cultures have folklore about creatures that dwell beneath beds. In Japan, the yokai known as makurageshi are spirits that disturb sleepers, sometimes flipping pillows or paralyzing children in their sleep. In European folklore, the bogeyman hides in dark corners, waiting for misbehaving children. And in some Native American traditions, there are stories of shadowy beings that watch from beneath sleeping spaces, feeding on fear. What if these myths aren't just stories? What if they're warnings? Perhaps the fear of what lurks under the bed isn't irrational at all. Perhaps, in some forgotten corners of the world, something really is waiting, watching, and listening. Next time you hear a noise beneath your bed, ask yourself, do you really want to know what's down there? Or is it better to pretend you never heard it at all? If you've ever had an unexplainable experience while home alone, let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more chilling tales from the dark corners of reality. Until next time, keep the lights on. And whatever you do, don't look under the bed. It was an ordinary evening for Claire. She worked a 9 to 5, nothing unusual about her day. The usual emails, the commute home, the slight exhaustion settling into her bones. She even stopped by the grocery store, picking up things she had memorized from years of habit. Her usual brand of coffee, the cereal she liked, the cat food for her tabby, Oliver. The sun had dipped below the horizon as she pulled into her driveway. Everything looked normal. The same white shutters, the same cracked pavement leading up to her front door. She reached into her bag, pulled out her key, and slid it into the lock. But it didn't fit. She frowned, shaking her head. Maybe she grabbed the wrong key. It was silly. She had lived here for 3 years. Muscle memory should have done the work for her. She tried again, turning it with a little more force. Nothing. A cold breeze passed over her, carrying the scent of wet leaves and damp earth. She hesitated, then knocked lightly on the door, half laughing to herself. Very funny, she muttered under her breath, though there was no one around to hear. She stepped back and peered through the window beside the door. And that's when her breath caught in her throat. Inside, the furniture was different. The couch wasn't hers. The coffee table was missing. The bookshelf, the one she had carefully arranged over the years, was gone. The layout was almost the same, but the colors, the textures, even the lighting, it all felt wrong. Her heart started to hammer. Was this the right house? She looked up at the address number above the door. Yes, it was hers. Wasn't it? She took a step back, her fingers trembling as she pulled out her phone. Maybe I should call the landlord, she murmured, her own voice sounding distant. But as she tapped at the screen, she saw something move inside the house. A shadow. It flickered in the hallway, near where her bedroom should be. She stopped breathing. Her instinct screamed at her to run, but she couldn't move. The lights inside flickered. A soft, rhythmic tapping came from the window, like fingernails gently drumming against the glass. Her own window, the one leading to her living room. She turned sharply to the side, looking for neighbors, for anyone who could confirm what was happening, but the street was eerily quiet. The houses sat in their familiar places, unchanged. The world outside remained normal. Only her house had changed. Then she heard it, a voice, not from inside the house, but from behind her. Claire, it whispered. She spun around, but there was no one there. Her hand shook as she clutched her phone. 911. She should call 911. But as she went to dial, the call was already connected. The line crackled, and a distorted version of her own voice whispered through the speaker. Go home, Claire. You don't belong here. Her phone screen glitched, the call ending itself. She gasped, dropping the device. Her breathing was ragged now, panic rising in her throat. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. She turned, ready to sprint back to her car, when she heard the front door unlock. Her body stiffened. Her door was slowly swinging open. Warm light spilled out onto the porch. A figure stood in the doorway. She didn't recognize them, but they recognized her. A woman, wearing Claire's clothes, holding Claire's cat, smiling in a way that stretched too far. "You must be lost," the woman said in Claire's own voice. And then the door slammed shut. Claire's house was there. Her address, her street, her memories. But she had somehow become a stranger to it. Or maybe something else had taken her place. Lisa had always been a light sleeper. It was a habit formed through years of single motherhood. Always attuned to the softest cry, the slightest movement from her infant son, Caleb. Their new home was supposed to be a fresh start, a small but cozy house nestled in a quiet neighborhood. One night, exhausted from a long day, Lisa collapsed onto her bed. The baby monitor sat on her nightstand, its small screen glowing faintly. She could see Caleb sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling in the dim nursery light. Then the noise started. At first, it was faint, a whisper so low she thought it was static. Lisa sat up, her pulse quickening. The whispering grew clearer, rhythmic like a conversation. The words were soft, almost soothing, but she couldn't understand them. The cadence was wrong, the language unfamiliar. Her first thought was interference. Baby monitors weren't perfect. Sometimes they picked up stray radio signals or even other baby monitors from nearby homes. But it was the way the voice spoke, slow and deliberate, as if whispering directly to Caleb, that sent a chill crawling up her spine. She reached for the monitor, turning up the volume. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by Caleb's soft breathing. For a long moment, she sat in silence, straining to hear anything else. Then, dismissing it as exhaustion, she turned over and went to sleep. She shouldn't have. Over the next few nights, the whispering returned. Sometimes faint, sometimes almost too clear. The words never in English. Lisa began recording the sounds on her phone, searching online for language recognition apps, but nothing matched. It was as if the words didn't belong to any known dialect. Then, one night, something changed. She was lying in bed, the monitor on low volume beside her, when she heard it again, those same rhythmic whispers. But this time she heard something else. Her name, Lisa. Her blood ran cold. She shot upright, staring at the monitor. The screen flickered. Caleb shifted in his crib, but didn't wake. The whispering stopped abruptly, leaving behind an unnatural silence. Heart hammering, she ran to the nursery. The room was still. Caleb was fine. The baby monitor sat where it always did, its small camera lens blinking innocently. Lisa grabbed it, checking the settings, the wires, even the walls for some rational explanation. There was none. She didn't sleep that night. Lisa tried everything to rationalize what was happening. Maybe the monitor was faulty. Maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on her mind. But as the whispers continued, as they grew clearer, more insistent, she knew something was terribly wrong. Then came the night that shattered any doubt. Lisa had placed Caleb down for the night and went through her usual routine, checking the locks, keeping the monitor close. She hadn't even dozed off when she heard it again. The whispering. But this time, it was different. The voice wasn't just speaking to Caleb. It was cooing. Soft, sickly sweet tones, the kind a mother might use to soothe her baby. But the words, they weren't right. They slithered through the static, low and wet, spoken with a patience that made her stomach turn. Lisa grabbed the monitor, her hands trembling. She didn't want to look, but she had to. The nursery camera flickered to life. For a moment, everything was normal. Caleb was still in his crib. The night light cast its usual glow. Then something shifted. In the farthest corner of the room, just beyond the camera's reach, the shadows deepened unnaturally. The pixels warped. And then, a shape, tall, unmoving, watching. Lisa's breath hitched. The figure stood impossibly still just beyond the crib. And though the camera's resolution was poor, she swore she could see its mouth moving. The whispering continued. Lisa screamed. Lisa didn't hesitate. She bolted into the nursery, yanked Caleb from his crib, and fled the house. She didn't stop until she was outside, shaking, heart pounding against her ribs. The baby monitor was still clutched in her hands. The screen was black. She never went back inside alone. The next morning, she called a friend and explained what happened. Together, they checked the nursery. The crib was untouched. The baby monitor sat where she had left it, but the recording she had taken the night before, it was gone. She moved out within the month. She never found an explanation for the whispers. No neighbor had the same baby monitor frequency. No radio signals matched the language she heard. And the most terrifying part? Caleb had started whispering back. Was it a case of audio interference? A mother's sleep-deprived paranoia? Or something more sinister? Stories of eerie baby monitor disturbances are not uncommon. There have been countless reports of phantom voices, shadowy figures, even sounds of crying when no baby is present. Some claim it's the result of faulty technology. Others believe baby monitors, designed to pick up subtle sounds, sometimes pick up things they were never meant to hear. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. When you're home alone at night, listening to the soft static of a baby monitor, you might not be the only one listening. And if you ever hear a whisper in a language you don't understand, don't wait to find out what it's saying. It started subtly. A man named Daniel moved into a quiet apartment on the outskirts of town. It was nothing fancy, just a small one-bedroom with peeling wallpaper and a single full-length mirror bolted to the bedroom wall. He never thought much about it. After all, mirrors are just mirrors, right? But over time, Daniel began to notice something strange. Every now and then, when he turned away, he'd get this uneasy feeling, like the mirror was taking just a second too long to reflect his movements. He told himself it was a trick of the mind, an overactive imagination. But deep down, something about it unsettled him. Then, things got worse. One evening, after a long shift at work, Daniel stood in front of the mirror, brushing his teeth. His reflection copied him, as always. But as he turned to grab a towel, his peripheral vision caught something off. His reflection hadn't turned away at the same time. It was subtle, a fraction of a second delay. But once he noticed it, he couldn't unsee it. A sick feeling settled in his stomach. He stared at himself for a long time, watching, waiting. But the reflection was back to normal, just his own tired face staring back. He laughed it off. Maybe he was just exhausted. Maybe he was imagining things. But he wasn't. That night, Daniel had a terrible nightmare. He was standing in front of the mirror again, except this time, his reflection wasn't mimicking him. It was watching him, studying him with a cold, unnatural stillness. Then ever so slowly it smiled. A wide, impossible smile that stretched too far across its face. He woke up in a cold sweat, his heart hammering. It was just a dream. Just a dream. But the next day, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The mirror seemed darker somehow, the glass murkier. And that night, something happened that made Daniel wish he had left the apartment for good. It was past midnight. The apartment was silent. Daniel was getting ready for bed when, for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt the urge to glance into the mirror one last time. His reflection was standing still. Daniel hadn't moved, but his reflection had stopped mimicking him. It just stood there, staring back with lifeless eyes. A cold wave of terror washed over him. Slowly, he lifted his hand. The reflection followed. He tilted his head. His reflection did too. But something was wrong. The longer he watched, the more he realized. The reflection was smiling, but Daniel wasn't. A slow, stretched-out grin spread across its face, teeth bared in an expression that wasn't human. His breath hitched, his limbs locked in place. Then, the reflection blinked, and Daniel didn't. The next thing Daniel knew, he was backing away, heart pounding. He threw a blanket over the mirror and didn't look at it for the rest of the night. The next morning, he called his landlord and demanded the mirror be removed. But when maintenance arrived, they found something chilling. The mirror wasn't bolted to the wall. In fact, it wasn't even attached at all. It was a standing mirror, one that could be moved, one that had nothing behind it. Or at least, that's what they thought, because when they lifted it away, they found scratch marks on the wall behind it. Long, deep grooves, as if something had been clawing at the wall from inside the glass. Daniel left the apartment that same day. So, what really happened to Daniel? Could this be a case of sleep deprivation mixed with paranoia? Or is there something darker lurking behind mirrors, watching us when we're not looking? One theory suggests that mirrors might act as gateways to another reality, a thin veil separating our world from something else. Some cultures believe reflections hold a piece of our soul, and if a mirror ever shows something that isn't you, it might mean that something else is taking your place. Another explanation? The tulpa theory, the idea that by focusing too much on an object, a person can create an entity, an independent consciousness formed from fear itself. Perhaps by staring too long, Daniel unknowingly invited something into his reflection. Or perhaps worst of all, the mirror didn't just reflect Daniel. Maybe it reflected something that had always been watching him. So the next time you're alone at night, standing in front of a mirror, be careful how long you stare. And if, by chance, you notice something slightly off, a delay, a movement that doesn't quite match, you might want to turn away before it's too late. Because sometimes reflections don't just copy you. Sometimes they watch. Emily had lived in her small suburban home for almost 5 years. It wasn't old, nor was it new. Just an ordinary house on an ordinary street. It had quirks, of course. The pipes rattled in the winter. The wooden floors creaked unpredictably. She had always told herself these were the natural sounds of a living home. But one night, something changed. It started as a faint, rhythmic tapping, a noise so subtle she barely noticed it at first. She was sitting on her couch, lost in a book, when she realized the sound was coming from behind the wall. A slow, deliberate pattern. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. She brushed it off as a neighbor doing some late-night work, but the next night, the knocking returned. The same deliberate rhythm. This time, it was closer. Over the next few days, the knocking became a nightly occurrence. Sometimes it was soft, barely audible, like fingertips drumming against the drywall. Other times, it was insistent, enough to wake her in the middle of the night. But the most unsettling part? The sound began to respond. One evening, in a half-nervous joke, Emily tapped back. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. Silence. She exhaled, almost laughing at herself, until knock, knock, knock. An exact replica of her pattern, echoing back from inside the walls. Imagine sitting alone in your house, surrounded by silence. And the moment you acknowledge something, it acknowledges you back. Emily's skin prickled as she stared at the blank wall. Was it just an echo? A trick of the acoustics? Or something more sinister? The following nights, she began experimenting. She knocked in different sequences, hoping to prove to herself that it was nothing more than an old house playing tricks. But the response was always precise, always deliberate. It wasn't random. It was listening. Unable to shake the growing sense of unease, Emily decided to investigate. She checked online forums, searching for possible explanations. Rats in the walls? Expanding pipes? But none of these would explain the pattern, the awareness behind the sound. Then, she remembered something. When she first moved in, the realtor had mentioned the house had been renovated. But what kind of renovations? And why? Her curiosity quickly turned to dread when she found the old floor plan of her home. A section of the blueprint didn't match what existed in her house. A narrow crawl space had been sealed off, right behind the very walls where the knocking had been coming from. That night, Emily barely slept. Every creak of the house felt louder. Every shadow stretched further. Then, around 2 a.m., the knocking came again. But this time it was different. It was frantic, desperate. Knock, 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 knock. She bolted upright in bed, heart hammering in her chest. The knocking came from the wall right next to her, like something was trying to get out. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone's flashlight and approached the source of the noise. And then, silence. The knocking stopped. But before she could even exhale, something new took its place. A whisper, muffled, barely there, but unmistakably human. "Help me." Emily fled the house that night and called the authorities. When the police arrived, they pried open the section of the wall where the sound had been coming from. What they found sent shivers through everyone present. A hidden crawl space. Small, cramped, and in it, scratch marks along the wooden beams. Fingernails embedded in the splinters. Signs that someone had been there. Recently. The implications were horrifying. Had someone been living in her walls all this time? A former tenant trapped and forgotten? Or something else? Some theories suggest that old houses hold onto memories, that trauma seeps into the very foundation. Was the house itself trying to tell her something? Or had she simply been on the verge of discovering a terrifying truth before someone or something stopped her? And then there's the final question. If Emily had never knocked back, would it have ever knocked at all? Stories like Emily's remind us that sometimes the most terrifying things are not ghosts or monsters, but the things that exist right next to us, just beyond the thin barrier of drywall and brick. How many noises do we ignore? How many shadows do we pretend not to see? So the next time you hear a sound in your house, a knock in the middle of the night, ask yourself, is it just the house settling? Or was something waiting for you to notice? Emma was a college student living in a small off-campus house. It wasn't much, just a modest rental in a quiet neighborhood. Her roommate, Lisa, had gone home for the weekend, leaving Emma alone for the first time in months. She wasn't worried. She actually looked forward to the solitude. A weekend of bad horror movies, takeout, and sleeping in. The first night was uneventful. She locked up, double-checked the windows, and fell asleep with her laptop playing in the background. It was around 1:30 a.m. when she woke up to the sound of knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. She lay there for a moment, groggy, wondering if she had imagined it. Then another 3 knocks. Louder this time. Emma's heart began to pound. Who would be knocking at her door this late? She reached for her phone, checking the front door camera. There, standing just outside the porch light's glow, was an elderly woman. She wore a long, tattered coat, and her hair was thin and gray, matted down as if she had been standing in the rain. Her posture was stiff, unnatural. Her face was mostly shadowed, but Emma could make out just enough to see that something was off. The woman knocked again. Emma hesitated before turning on the intercom. Hello. The woman took a step closer. Sweetheart, my car broke down. Can I come in and use your phone? Her voice was soft, almost too soft, like a whisper pressed against Emma's eardrum. Something about the way she spoke made Emma shiver. It wasn't the frail, pleading tone of someone in distress. It was calculated, controlled. I can call someone for you, Emma offered. A long silence. Then, the woman took another step closer to the door. I need to come inside, she said. Emma's stomach twisted. Something wasn't right. She glanced at the street behind the woman. No car, no signs of a breakdown. Just the dark, empty road. I can't let you in, Emma said firmly. But I'll call someone to help. The woman's head twitched slightly. Then, she did something that made Emma's breath catch in her throat. She smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, stretching her skin too tight over her cheekbones. And her eyes, they were wrong. In the dim glow of the porch light, they looked too dark. Not the normal murky black of pupils in the shadows, but deeper, like 2 gaping voids pulling in the light around them. Then she spoke again. That's not very polite, dear. Emma's fight-or-flight instincts kicked in. She backed away from the door, her breath coming in short gasps. She hit the lock on the smart app and checked the camera again. The woman was gone. She hadn't walked away. She hadn't turned. She was just gone, as if she had never been there at all. Emma barely slept that night. She kept checking the cameras, scanning the windows, jumping at every little sound. By morning, she convinced herself that maybe it was just a strange encounter. A lost woman, a trick of the poor lighting. But then, the footprints. When she stepped onto the porch, she noticed them immediately. Dark, muddy footprints leading up to her door. But they weren't normal. They were too long, too thin, the toes curling slightly inward like an animal's. They didn't match the shape of the old woman's feet at all. And worse, that they didn't lead away. Emma checked the footage again. Nothing. No signs of movement. It was as if the woman had vanished into thin air. That evening, Emma kept every light in the house on. She locked and relocked the doors. She thought about leaving, going to a friend's place, but she told herself she was overreacting. Then, at exactly 1:30 a.m., the knocking came again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Emma's blood turned to ice. She pulled up the camera. The woman was back. Only this time, she was closer. Her face was fully visible now, pressed against the glass of the front door. Her mouth hung open in a silent scream. Her jaw stretched wider than it should have been, almost unhinged. And her eyes, those endless black voids, stared straight into the camera. Then the screen glitched. The feed cut out. Emma grabbed her phone and dialed 911. But before the call could go through, the power flickered. Then, the doorknob turned. No one knows exactly what happened that night. When the police arrived, they found Emma locked in her bathroom, too terrified to speak. She moved out of the house the next day, refusing to ever go back. The cameras never caught the woman leaving. The only evidence she had ever been there was the deep scratches on the front door, gouges in the wood, and the footprints that never led away. Some believe it was just a deranged stranger. But others, those who have seen her or heard the knocking, say otherwise. They say she's still out there, waiting for the next person to open the door. When Ethan Carter moved into his new home, he expected fresh beginnings. A quiet suburban life. A fresh coat of paint over an old story. The house was cheap for its size, too cheap, in hindsight, but he chalked it up to luck. A fixer-upper, the realtor had said. Just needs a little love. For the first few weeks, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. A creaky floorboard here, the occasional draft there. But then, he noticed something strange about the basement. The blueprint he had received from the real estate office clearly marked a single basement room. Yet, standing at the bottom of the stairs one night, Ethan spotted an outline on the wall, a door frame concealed beneath layers of drywall and paint. A door that wasn't supposed to be there. Most people would have ignored it, maybe even should have. But curiosity has a way of creeping in, much like the shadows that stretched along the walls that night. Ethan retrieved a crowbar and started peeling away the layers. The paint cracked, the drywall crumbled, and soon, he was staring at a wooden door with no handle. A door that had been sealed from the outside. With effort, he pried it open, and the stench hit him first. Stale air, dust, and something else. Something metallic. The room was small, no more than 8 feet by 10, with unfinished cement walls. No light fixtures. No windows. Just a bed, a chair, and chains bolted to the floor. Ethan's stomach turned. He stepped inside cautiously, running his fingers along the thick iron shackles, rusted with time. They were positioned near the bed frame, just long enough to let someone move, but never escape. Then, he noticed something worse. Scratch marks, deep gouges in the cement, carved by fingernails or something sharper. Desperate, erratic, some overlapping, as if made by different people over time. Above the bed, faint but unmistakable, words had been scratched into the wall. I was here. I am still here. A chill crawled up Ethan's spine. He turned, suddenly feeling watched, but the room was empty. For now. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. His dreams were filled with muffled whispers, the clinking of chains, and a hollow voice repeating the words. I am still here. Objects in his home began moving on their own. He would leave his keys on the kitchen counter, only to find them in the basement. The door to the hidden room, though he had shut it, was always slightly ajar. One night, as he lay in bed, he heard it, a dragging sound, coming from below. Ethan bolted upright. He grabbed his phone and tiptoed toward the basement. The wooden steps groaned under his weight, the air colder than before. With shaking hands, he shined his flashlight toward the hidden room. The chair had moved. It was now positioned facing the door. Then a whisper, so faint he almost thought it was in his head. I'm still here. Determined to understand what he had found, Ethan began researching the house's past. Records were scarce, but he eventually uncovered an old news clipping from the 1980s, one that made his blood run cold. A man named Walter Greaves had once lived in the house, a quiet, unassuming neighbor. But behind closed doors, he had a secret. The article detailed the disappearance of several people, all vanishing within a 5-year span. The police had suspected Walter, but they never found evidence, never found them. Some believed he had an accomplice. Others whispered that his victims never left. Ethan's house had been his house, and the hidden basement? That was where they were kept. That night, Ethan made a decision. He was leaving. Whatever lingered in the basement wasn't just history, it was hungry. He packed his bags, booked a hotel, and vowed to sell the house as soon as possible. But the house had other plans. As he carried his suitcase toward the door, every light in the house flickered. The air turned suffocatingly cold. And then, bang, the basement door slammed shut. His phone died instantly. His breath turned to mist. And from below, echoing through the floorboards, came the unmistakable sound of chains dragging. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming up the basement stairs. He ran. He didn't look back. Ethan never returned. The house was abandoned, and new buyers were warned away by rumors of unexplained noises, objects moving, and whispers at night. The hidden room was eventually sealed shut again. But some say if you stand in the basement long enough, you can still hear it. The chains, the whispers, and the faint sound of someone breathing right behind you. Some homes have skeletons in their closets. Others have secrets buried within their walls. But the darkest ones? They don't let go of their past. And sometimes they don't let go of their guests either. If you enjoyed this story, remember to like, subscribe, and let me know, would you have opened that hidden door? Sleep tight, and whatever you do, don't go into the basement. It was late. The kind of late where the world feels like it's been put on pause, where even the air inside the house seems heavier, thicker. A boy, let's call him Daniel, lay in his bed, covers pulled up to his chin, listening to the faint hum of the wind outside. His mother had left earlier that evening for a work trip. It was just him and his dad at home. And yet, something woke him up. A sound. Soft, deliberate footsteps echoing through the darkened hallway. At first, he thought it was his father, maybe heading to the kitchen for a drink of water. But as the footsteps grew closer, something felt wrong. His father's room was on the other end of the house. The steps were coming from the hallway outside his door. He swallowed hard, his pulse quickening. Slowly, he turned his head to the side, peeking over the edge of his blanket, his eyes adjusting to the dim glow of the nightlight. And that's when he saw it, a figure, standing in the hallway just outside his open door. His mother, or at least it looked like her. She stood there, her long hair falling over her shoulders, her face partially obscured by shadows. But something about her posture, something about the way she just stood there, made his stomach twist with unease. His mother wasn't supposed to be home. She was miles away in a hotel room, hours from their house. Then she moved, a slow, unnatural tilt of the head. Her limbs too stiff, too still, like she was waiting, watching. His breath hitched in his throat. He wanted to call out, to say Mom, but the words wouldn't come. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there in the dim glow of the hallway light. And then it took a step forward. Daniel felt his body lock in place, frozen between disbelief and terror. He clenched the sheets tighter, his mind racing for an explanation. Was he dreaming? Was his mind playing tricks on him? And then his mother, the thing that looked like his mother, spoke. Go back to sleep, sweetheart. Her voice was soft, almost too soft, like a whisper carried on the wind. But something was off. It was her voice, but not quite. There was an eerie hollowness to it, a wrongness that made his skin crawl. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut, heart hammering against his ribs. When he opened them again, she was gone. The hallway was empty. For a moment, all he could hear was the ringing silence, the deafening quiet of the house around him. Had he imagined it? Was it just a trick of the dim light, a half-formed dream creeping into his waking mind? No, because then the footsteps started again. This time, running, racing down the hall, slamming into walls within human speed. Daniel screamed. Within seconds, his father burst into the room, eyes wild with confusion. He flicked on the light, scanning the space. What's wrong? He asked, voice sharp with concern. Daniel was shaking, gasping for breath. He pointed to the hallway, his voice barely a whisper. Mom was there. His father's face paled. He rushed to the hallway, checking every room, every locked door. Nothing. No sign of her. But Daniel knew what he had seen. What happened to Daniel that night? Could have been sleep paralysis, a vivid night terror? Maybe. But here's where things get truly disturbing. A few days later, His mother returned from her trip, and when she did, something strange happened. The moment she walked through the door, she stopped, eyes flicking toward the hallway, her face suddenly drained of color. "Something's wrong," she muttered. Daniel's father frowned. "What do you mean?" His mother hesitated, staring down the hallway with a look of quiet dread. I don't know. It just feels like something else has been here." Daniel felt the air in the room shift, an unspoken heaviness settling over them. His mother had no idea what had happened while she was gone, and yet she felt it too. Could it have been a doppelganger? An entity that mimicked her form, creeping into their home, waiting in the darkness? Some cultures believe that doppelgangers are harbingers of misfortune, warnings of impending doom. Others say there's something else entirely. Not just copies, but something worse. Something empty. A hollow thing that walks in the shape of someone familiar, but isn't them. So what did Daniel see that night? A trick of the mind? A manifestation of fear? Or was it something far more sinister? Something that wanted to be seen? Maybe somewhere out there, lurking in the dark corners of our homes, in the blind spots of our vision, there's something else watching us. Something that knows exactly what we fear. And sometimes it looks just like us. If you've ever seen something out of the corner of your eye, something that shouldn't be there, maybe it wasn't just your imagination. Maybe it was waiting for you to notice. It started with the TV. Mia had lived alone for years. She liked the solitude. No messy roommates, no awkward silences with strangers. Just her and the low hum of her old apartment. Most nights, she curled up on her couch, a blanket draped over her legs, the soft glow of the television keeping her company as she drifted off to sleep. But this night was different. She had turned the TV off before heading to bed, the remote still on the coffee table where she left it. But at exactly 2:47 a.m., she woke up to the unmistakable flickering glow from the living room. The television was on. At first, she thought she had simply forgotten to turn it off. It wouldn't have been the first time, but as she rubbed her eyes and looked closer, something felt off. The screen was on, but there was no channel, just static, white noise hissing into the dark, filling the air with an electric tension. She reached for the remote and pressed the power button. The screen went black. A minor glitch, she told herself. Maybe a power surge. Nothing to worry about. But as she turned to go back to bed, she saw it. A shadow, not on the walls, not in the room, but on the screen. A dark silhouette standing behind her. Mia se bretiched. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She spun around, scanning the empty room. Nothing. The apartment was silent. Still, just the hum of the fridge and the creak of the old wooden floor beneath her bare feet. She let out a nervous chuckle, shaking her head. Maybe she was just tired, seeing things. But as she turned back to the TV, the static had changed. The screen no longer showed random white noise. It was displaying her living room. Not a recording, not a reflection. A live feed, and she was in it. Mia stared at the screen, her own figure illuminated in the flickering light. But there was something wrong. She wasn't moving. The version of her on the screen stood completely still, her eyes fixed forward, unblinking. She lifted her hand, testing it. The figure on the TV did nothing. Then, slowly, its lips curled into a smile. Mia staggered back, her breath coming in short gasps. The figure on the screen, the thing that looked like her, took a step forward. But in reality, she hadn't moved an inch. Her body was frozen in terror, her mind screaming at her to run. Then the lights in her apartment flickered. She grabbed the remote and frantically pressed the power button, but the screen wouldn't turn off. The TV grew brighter, the glow pulsating like a heartbeat, like it was breathing. Then the Mia on the screen turned its head, just slightly, and looked directly at her. That was enough. Mia bolted, running for the door. She yanked it open, stepping out into the hallway, her hands shaking as she fumbled for her phone. The moment she stepped outside, the lights in her apartment went out completely. She barely hesitated before dialing 911, her voice trembling as she explained that someone was in her apartment. But when the police arrived minutes later, there was no sign of forced entry. No sign of another person. Nothing on the security cameras. And worst of all, the TV was off. So what happened to Mia that night? Was it a ghost? A glitch in reality? Or something far more sinister? Many believe that televisions, especially older ones, are more than just machines. They're windows, not just into different channels or frequencies, but into different realities. What Mia saw on that screen wasn't just a malfunction. It was a reflection of something trying to break through. Doppelgangers, shadow entities, and distorted versions of ourselves have been reported throughout history, appearing in mirrors, reflections, and even technology. Some theorists suggest that these figures exist in parallel dimensions, waiting for the right moment to step through. But there's something even more terrifying. If Mia's double was in the TV that night, where is it now? Did it stay trapped behind the screen? Or did it switch places with her? Stories like this remind us how fragile reality can be, how the things we trust to be safe, like the glow of a television screen, can sometimes reveal horrors we were never meant to see. So next time you're home alone and the TV flickers on by itself, be careful what you watch, because sometimes it watches back. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more eerie tales from Mr. 13 O'Clock. Have you ever experienced something unexplainable while home alone? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, keep the lights on. It started with little things. Adam was a college student living in a small 2-bedroom apartment just off campus. His roommate, Josh, had decided to move back home a few weeks prior, leaving Adam with the entire place to himself. At first, the solitude was welcome. He could stay up as late as he wanted, leave dishes in the sink without guilt, and study in total silence. But then, strange things began happening. The first time Adam noticed something was off, it was small. He came home from class one afternoon and saw that the bathroom light was on. He was sure he had turned it off that morning, but maybe he was wrong. He had been rushing. A few nights later, he heard footsteps in the hallway while he was lying in bed. Heavy, deliberate steps. His first instinct was to call out to Josh, but then he remembered, Josh doesn't live here anymore. A cold sensation crept over him, but he convinced himself it was the neighbors. Thin walls, old buildings, noise travels. Days passed, and the incidents grew more unsettling. Adam would wake up to find the fridge slightly open, even though he never left it that way. The faucet would be dripping when he swore it had been dry the night before. And then came the sounds. Late at night, while studying at his desk, he would hear the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. His heart would race, but when he checked, every door in the apartment was shut. The worst part? The sound weren't just random. They were purposeful. A door would creak, then silence. Then, a few minutes later, soft footsteps would follow. One night, he heard something even worse. Breathing. Not his own. Not through the walls. It was close, too close, like someone was just behind him. But when he spun around, the room was empty. At that point, Adam started keeping a baseball bat near his bed. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, past 2 a.m. Adam had just finished watching a movie in the living room when he heard a sound from Josh's old room, the room that was supposed to be empty. A muffled shuffling, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. His stomach twisted. He crept toward the door, gripping the bat so tightly his knuckles ached. He hesitated, listening. The room was silent now, but the air felt different, charged like the moment before a thunderstorm. Summoning every ounce of courage, Adam turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. He scanned the space. Nothing was out of place. The closet door was open, just a crack. It had been closed before. Holding his breath, he reached out and swung the door open in one swift motion. Nothing. Just empty shelves, old textbooks, and dust-covered clothes that Josh had left behind. Adam let out a shaky laugh. He was losing it. This apartment, this solitude, was making him paranoid. Then he saw it. The vent. A large air vent, low to the ground, just behind the closet door. It was slightly ajar. Heart pounding, Adam knelt down and pulled it open the rest of the way. Inside was a small, dark crawl space, too small for an adult, but big enough for someone determined to fit. The space smelled damp, like old wood and something else, something rotten. And then he saw them. items that didn't belong to him or Josh. Empty food wrappers, a tattered blanket, a notebook, its pages filled with messy, frantic handwriting. He picked it up with shaking hands and flipped through the pages. At first, it was nonsense, disconnected thoughts, scribbles, names he didn't recognize. Then he saw his own name, and beneath it, a message scrawled over and over. "I see you when you sleep." Adam stumbled back, nearly dropping the notebook. The air around him felt suffocating. He had been living with someone who had been watching him, someone who had been there all along. That's when he heard it, a noise from inside the vent, a scraping sound like nails against metal. Adam didn't hesitate. He ran. He grabbed his keys, flew out the door, and didn't look back. The police arrived within minutes. They searched the crawl space and found clear evidence that someone had been living there. Empty food containers, clothes, even a makeshift pillow. But whoever it was, they were gone. Authorities speculated that it could have been a former tenant, a squatter, or someone who had found a way inside through an unseen entrance. But one thing was certain, this wasn't just in Adam's head. The signs were there all along. And that's the terrifying part. How often do we brush off the strange and the unexplained? A misplaced object, a sound in the night, a door left open when you were sure it was closed. We tell ourselves it's nothing, that we're imagining things. But what if we're not? What if someone or something is closer than we think, watching from just out of sight? Tonight, as you turn off your lights and settle in for the night, remember this. Sometimes the scariest things aren't the ghosts or monsters we imagine. They're the people we don't realize are already inside,